Hey everyone, I'm Kim, the mom boss behind EmeryandK. Welcome back to my channel. Today's tumbler tutorial, we're going to put a fun, crackly, rustic coastal spin on a burst tumbler. I will list and link everything I use in the description box below. I'll have some discount codes down there for you as well. Let's get to it. As always, we're going to start with our fully prepped and painted tumbler. Today I'm using a 20-ounce skinny. This is from Hog. I just sanded it and painted it white. And now we're going to grab our tacky tape and we're going to cut out this shell burst template on there. This is from Ellie's Crafty Co. And so when I cut my templates for my 20-ounce tumblers, I do 8.05 by 9.15. And I have a Cricut Maker. I created a custom setting on my Cricut with a pressure of 70. I do have a video that I made a couple of weeks ago showing you how to create a custom setting on your Cricut, so I will be sure to link that below. Now, to wrap this, I'm really going to focus just on the seam. I don't pay too much attention if the top or the bottom are perfectly even. I just focus on the seam because any little like change in the top or bottom, if they don't meet perfectly, we can always fix that with a little bit of sanding or painting around that bottom rim. But the seam is the most important thing. So I want to get my seam lined up, and then I like to hold my tacky tape in place with some sewing clips. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab my weeding tool and I'm going to expose about 1/2 inch or so of that sticky adhesive. I just like to fold that backing just back. And then I'm going to put it on my tumbler using my vinyl squeegee, and I like to push it down in the center and then out to the edges. And I'm going to remove the sewing clips, and then I'll slowly work my way around my tumbler with this vinyl squeegee tool, and I will just pull about 1/2 inch to 1 inch or so of the backing away at a time and just gently press this onto my tumbler until I have gone around the whole thing. If I end up with any little bubbles or air pockets, I take my weeding tool and just kind of gently push it like into a cut line, and then I can squeeze the air out and those little bubbles have gone away. Now that we have our tumbler wrapped, we're going to move on to glitter. So all of my colors, of course, are from the glitter guy. I'm going to be using Sands of Time, Andes, Rock Candy, Patty Cakes, Strawbana, Vanilla Wafer, and then this mixture. And this is for the sand on the tumbler. I did 2 parts Vanilla Wafer, 1 part Sands of Time. As with any burst tumbler, we're going to go ahead and start with the darkest colors first and work our way through to the lightest. So first I'm going to start with Sands of Time, and I am using that to do all these little outlines on my shapes. And I have sped up my glittering here, and I'm not going to make you guys watch the whole thing because I have some other tutorials that go a little bit slower and more in depth on how to glitter a double-sided adhesive template. So this one we're just going to kind of speed through so that you're not here all day watching me glitter. So I'm going to remove these skinny lines, and then I'm going to dump on the Sands of Time. I will brush off the extra, and then we'll move on to the next color. Once those little lines are done, we are going to take those pastels. We're going to add some color to our shells. So I did go in with a pen and just kind of mark which shells I wanted which color. I did this so that I could glitter really and just kind of turn my brain off and not think about it, but still have a well-balanced, like aesthetically pleasing tumbler. So that's totally your choice. If you don't want to, your craft room, your rules, no biggie. You can just go in with your glitter and put it where it goes. But I'm just, like I said, working through all of these pastel colors and adding those to each of the shells. Now you want to make sure that you stop before Strawbana and Vanilla Wafer and do your sand mixture. Now I decided to take out the like outlines on the shells and just do them all sand because I couldn't figure out a color that I thought would look good, and I thought I'm just going to do it all sandy, and I love how it turned out. So that was a good choice on my part. And then I also do the little circles on the starfish in that same color that I did the sand on. And then I'll go ahead and finish up with these last 2 colors. Once I've glittered, I will do a good coat of my Rust-Oleum 2x clear glass sealer. I will put on a coat of epoxy, and then I will see you once that's cured. After our epoxy has cured, we are going to add our fun crackle effect. So I am just using Elmer's School Glue. This is just from Walmart, the regular stuff. And I'm going to make a mixture of 2 parts glue to 1 part water. I just did it in this little tiny baby mason jar because I could put the lid on and shake it, and that made mixing it super simple. For our paint, I'm going to be using this chalk paint. This is just from Walmart. It's in the color Pool. You can use any like blue paint that you have, acrylic paint, anything is fine. And you'll want something to just blob your paint on. I'm using just this little piece of parchment paper, but again, use whatever you have on hand. You'll also want something to put your tumbler on so that it's not sitting on the counter. I just used a water bottle. I feel like I keep saying this, but just use whatever you have on hand. You'll also want a large paintbrush to put your glue mixture on your tumbler. And then I am actually using a sheet of sandpaper to apply my paint. And as you see this in the video, if you have something else you think that would work better, again, go ahead and use that. I just use sandpaper because I liked the kind of like rough, like rusticy look that it gave the paint as I was putting it on my tumbler. So now I'm going to go in with my paintbrush and I'm just going to start splooshing this glue mixture onto my tumbler. You want to keep in mind the thicker the glue, kind of the larger the cracks that you will get in your Crackle, and the thinner the smaller. Now as I'm painting this on, I'm doing it pretty thick because I want to make sure I have some really big cracks in there so that you can see these shells underneath. I don't want the shells to be completely covered up. So I'm just going to continue brushing on this glue mixture, and then after that we'll move on to paint. With our glue all spread on there, we're going to add our paint. And like I said, I want to make sure I have good sections of the shells exposed. So I am just going to take my piece of sandpaper and I'm just kind of like blotting it in my paint. This doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be uniform. I really want just like an organic rustic look to this. And so I'm going to take my piece of sandpaper and I'm just going to start spreading this paint on my tumbler. There are a few things to remember throughout this process. So the first is do not overwork your paint into your glue. You can see I'm just dipping in my paint. I'm doing a stroke up, a stroke down, and then I'm moving on to the next section. You don't want to overwork your paint or you won't get any crackles. The other thing to remember is wherever there is glue, that's going to dry clear, and then once you put epoxy on it, the glue is totally going to disappear. So that will be all just exposed shells. So keep that in mind. You don't want to cover up all of the shells underneath. So I'm just going to continue doing this until it looks like I'm happy-ish. I feel like this is a really big like trust the process kind of thing. So I'm just going to get some paint on there until I think this looks pretty good, and then I'm going to set it aside to dry. I ended up setting my tumbler aside and letting it dry for about 24 hours. That's just how my timeline worked. I do think 12 hours would have been fine also, but once it's fully dry, if you want to add a little bit more of a rustic effect, we're going to grab our sandpaper. Now this part is totally optional. If you want to add a little more distressing to your tumbler, you're going to want to grab some sandpaper or sanding block, again, whatever you have on hand. I'm going to be using this little piece of sandpaper. It is a 180, and I am just going to gently go in and sand a little bit of this paint. Now you want to make sure that you take this nice and slow because of course once you take it off you can't put it back on. But I'm just going through in places where I'm like, oh, I wish there was a little bit more exposed here, I wish there was a little more crackle here, and just adding a little bit more of like a rustic worn look to it. I really wanted this tumbler to reflect like kind of a rustic beachy decor that you would find, like where there's a lot of crackled wood and weathered wood and all that. So I'm just going in and roughing it up a little bit. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to go ahead and do 2 more coats of epoxy and this tumbler will be finished. I did of course add ultra white mica into my last coat of epoxy to give a little bit of sparkle because, you know, that's just what I do. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this tutorial helpful, maybe a little bit inspirational. If you did, I would love a thumbs up on my video. If you want to see more tutorials in the future, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Until next time, happy crafting.